What's going on? That's Textbook Sports Squad. It is, of course, as y'all know it, a feel-good Friday, fantastic Friday, payday Friday, any type of whatever you want to call it. It's Friday. The weekend's approaching up, and with the weekend approaching up, we know that college football, NFL football, gonna be going on. Lots to talk about within college football. Some key matchups coming ahead. NFL football, talking about last night's game, Thursday night football, Chicago Bears, Carolina Panthers. And the hardcore truth about Bryce Young and the type of supporting cast he has around him. Be talking about all of that. Let's just get into this podcast episode. Got a lot coming up. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, follow me on social media. The links to my social media will be in the description. Make sure you go check that out. Give me a follow there. Like this video, subscribe. And of course, as you all know, that's Textbook. So in last night's game, Thursday night football, Carolina Panthers, Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears won this football game. Listen, before kickoff actually, this is a game none of us looked forward to. These are two bad football teams. And even though the Chicago Bears won the football game, they've traded for Montez Sweat. They've looked a little bit better defensively, although considering the state that they were in before, uh, the little bit of improvement is massive for them, considering how bad they were. It's still a bad football team, even though they won the football game. Offensively, really struggling. Their identity is running the football with Deontay Foreman. That's key for them. Defensively, Montez Sweat, like I mentioned, is playing really good for them, being really productive. It's still a team that isn't a rebuild, of course. But the most important story in last night's game wasn't the fact that it was two rookies going up against each other. One of them happened to be undrafted. But it's about Bryce Young and his season so far. I've seen a lot of people, especially on social media, in the media, analysts, whatever, really be harsh on Bryce Young. And listen, he's the first overall draft pick. With great power comes great responsibility with that. A lot of people are going to have high expectations for you when you're the first overall draft pick. But considering what he has on that team, he really doesn't have much. You can look at all the advanced analytics, the separation analytics, the analytics considering the roster, offensive line, weapons that he has around him. And you don't have to go that far because you can just watch the football game and understand that he really doesn't have that much help. This team's best option right now is Adam Thielen. Now, he's had a really nice year, but Adam Thielen's just not the same as what he used to be in his prime years in Minnesota. And now that's your number one option. The offensive line has protection issues just about everywhere. There's also a lot of coaching that I think Bryce Young has to overcome too. Because some of the plays that they're running, there's no spacing. I guarantee you not. Some of the plays that they run when they show the replays or when you watch the game, it looks like basic plays that you see in Madden. And a lot of it, too, is the routes are on top of each other. There's not a whole lot of spacing. These are routes, some basic routes that they're asking guys to run, like curl, hitch routes, for separation. The guys that they have on the roster really don't have any separation. So when you're asking guys who don't have separation to run separation routes, it's going to look ugly. Lots of hitches, lots of curls down the middle, hitch routes. That's all basically the Carolina Panthers passing offenses. Hardly ever or hardly any shots down the field. And you saw the tape at Alabama. Bryce Young was very efficient downfield, doesn't have the strongest arm, but an accurate passer. And then listen, he's a small quarterback behind an offensive line that can't protect. Things are only going to get worse for the Carolina Panthers as well because you look at they don't have a first-round draft pick in the 2024 draft, which is this upcoming draft. That's going to be given to Chicago. Right now, currently, their pick, if they were to have it, would be the first overall pick in the draft. It's only going to get worse for Bryce Young. I listen, a lot of people will talk about CJ Stroud and him. CJ Stroud was my top rated quarterback in the draft. You can go to my social media, see I have him. So this isn't hindsight, but I liked Stroud. And listen, these CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, two really good quarterbacks, really good coming out of college. But a lot of people during the pre-draft process made it think that Bryce Young was head and shoulders over CJ Stroud, when that really wasn't necessarily the case. Then you look at the season CJ Stroud is having right now, top 10 in the league, you would consider. I mean, I don't think that's a stretch to say the way CJ Stroud's playing right now is top 10. And then the way Bryce Young is playing, before these two rosters ever stepped on the field for a regular season game, a lot of people didn't think the Houston Texans were a ideal landing spot for a potential franchise quarterback. Didn't have a whole lot of weapons, protection issues on the offensive line. Listen, and they're still mixing in some offensive linemen that are hurt. The Houston Texans' best options, maybe they're a little bit better, but maybe that's a little bit of inflation just because how pure of a pocket passer and how great CJ has been playing. But these two rosters beforehand, moral of the story, weren't ideally great before the regular season turned out. Now, with CJ balling out, there's a lot of people that are hating on Bryce Young. Listen, Bryce Young, you got to give a lot of these rookies time. Some rookies, of course, they're gonna take off, but I believe you have to give Bryce Young some time. We can't write him off right now. At least let's just give him another season to see how he performs. If he doesn't, and looking at the future of this Carolina Panthers roster and how they can construct some weapons and protection, something to support Bryce Young, doesn't look like it's going to happen. Who knows how that plays on later on down the future, what type of moves they make. But let's just give Bryce Young another year. He's a really good quarterback that's having to overcome not only the talent that he has around him, but also coaching. And I want to talk about roster construction. Because in the NFL and in the pre-draft process, of course, roster building, every team, if you ask them, would have that franchise quarterback first. And correctly so. I just think that when you're building a team, you can either put your star quarterback or your potential franchise quarterback in the most ideal situation, or build it up and have them still learning. If I'm a team let's just put this rhetorical situation out here. If I'm a team that I have a good offensive line, I have weapons around, but I'm picking in the teens, and because I have such a good roster around, even with the backup or journeyman quarterback, I'm picking in the teens. I think that's the most ideal time for you to trade up. Why not trade up then? Give up the future. A lot of people will say, well, why give up the future and then have him just be a bust? Well, why draft a quarterback when you don't have the ideal things in place, when you don't have the right coaching, when you don't have the offensive line or any type of playmakers around them? Have them overcome that at such a young stage in their career. Spend a boatload of draft capital like a team like multiple have done, and then I'll have it to be for the quarterback to fill. So either way, you end up in all worst outcome possible. You end up in the worst outcome trying to find another franchise quarterback, having to hit that reset button, which a lot of general managers, team presidents, fans, everyone hates to admit. Why not trade up when you know you have the right pieces, as opposed to drafting them and then building the right pieces in the process? Now that both work. There's not a one fits all formula. Both obviously do work, but I think in that situation of having the franchise quarterback and then building around, you have to be the right organization to do it. Like everyone talks about, these things, these intangibles like culture, championship DNA, all of those sorts of things. You have to have that type of culture in for your quarterback to be the franchise and to be the future. So those are just my 2 cents. on Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, how Bryce Young has performed so far, and building a franchise quarterback or building the team for your franchise quarterback. My audience out there, everybody listening to this, I appreciate y'all. Let me know what you think. I love your participation in this podcast. Would you rather be a team that's in the teens but has everything in place for your star quarterback, or would you be opposite of that and say, let's put the franchise quarterback first and then build around them? I'd like to know and I'm curious to know what you think in the comments. I appreciate it. So the College Football Playoff Committee met. Really wasn't a whole lot of changes, and none of us really expected any of them. At number 1, you're going to have Ohio State. Number 2, it's Georgia. 3, Michigan. 4, Florida State. 5, Washington. 6, Oregon. I believe 7 is Texas. 8 being Alabama. And I think that those 8 right there all have a really good chance at making the college football playoff. Now, what I will say about it is that there is a path and a destiny to complete and utter chaos in college football. There's multiple teams across 5 conferences. That is the Big Ten, SEC, ACC, Pac-12, Big 12, with one or multiple teams vying for a college football playoff spot. Now, remember, there's only 4 spots in the college football playoff that can be had. For the SEC, there's the possibility that it's Alabama, Georgia, of course, maybe Ole Miss, depending on what happens. And then with the Big Ten, you're going to have Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State in there. With the ACC, there's a possibility that Louisville takes that next step up. And then, of course, you have Florida State. If they don't make any mistakes, or they're the only one that's stopping them from going to the college football playoff is themselves. And then with the Pac-12, we're going to have Oregon, Washington, Big 12, Texas. So there is a path. Come, I believe it's December, somewhere into the December teens, I believe. I know it's right after the conference championship games when they set the final ones in. That could be the path. And that's the path for utter chaos in college football. And of course, we know the committee hates it, but everyone of us and the audience loves to see it. Now, speaking on just the top 4, I think with Ohio State, their path is you're just going to have to win out. Win out, beat Michigan, which is going to be another one of your key wins. The Notre Dame win is kind of looking iffy just because sometimes they'll look great. I mean, they beat USC, right? But then we see how USC is. And then Notre Dame, but they did lose to Louisville. But we also know how Louisville's playing. So the Notre Dame win is it's a coin flip. Then you look at with Penn State looking as a good win right now. Although Penn State, Michigan meeting up this weekend. But then again, with Ohio State, it's beat Michigan, beat your rival, which you have to. And considering what's going on in Michigan, there's a lot of pressure for Ohio State to right the ship, write everything back, rewrite all the narratives about the last 2 losses against Michigan. Lots of pressure for Ryan Day and company to get back at Michigan. And then you're looking at for Georgia, I mean, win out, beat Alabama. Of course, you're going to get in. For Michigan, same formula, got to win out. Although I think if Michigan were to lose one game, and I think this is for Michigan and Ohio State or any team in the Big Ten, like if they were to lose one game, I think they're out. Especially with Michigan, you see their schedule thus far and who they've played. Although they have covered the spread, they have taken care of business. If any one of those teams in the Big Ten were to lose, I think they're out immediately. Of course, they're going to have a lot of help, but the chances are really slim if they were to lose any one of these games. For Florida State, the path for them is don't beat yourselves up. Like, the only one that can stop us from not making the college football playoff is ourselves. And then with those teams on the outside, they're obviously going to need some help. Alabama, if they were to beat Georgia, now are 2 SEC teams going to get into the college football playoff. Considering how the committee has done in the past, that seems most likely. I mean, if Alabama beats the defending champs, they obviously get in. Now, if Alabama were to slip up along the way and then Ole Miss gets in, There's a little bit of chaos right there. And then Oregon, Washington, those Pac-12 teams. Like each team I'm talking about, really they just control their own destiny. Now there's a couple teams that might need some help, but everyone control your destiny. And like I mentioned, if they do that, which there's a very good chance that they could, we're talking about multiple teams across multiple conferences looking at or vying for a college football playoff spot. All the more chaos for the committee. How are they going to divvy that up? That's when we get into the deep details about covering the spread, how they looked, the eye test, resume, which also, as I segue into this next segment, brings another thing. For this college football playoff, I'm talking about specifically this year because we know in the past the committee has based it upon eye test and resume. Asking my audience to judge or rank this college football playoff, meaning the top four. What are we using? What tool are we going to use? Because there's a lot of debate across college football for this. Are we going to use the eye test or are we going to use resume? Because I think when we use resume, for example, with any team, like let's just say Ohio State, they beat Notre Dame, but then we see Notre Dame kind of fall off later. So is that a quality win? Because at the time it was a quality win, but seeing how Notre Dame has performed after that, it doesn't look as great. Now let's say Penn State were to lose to Michigan. What type of quality of a win is that? That's the thing with resume and college football, the college football playoff. If you're playing a top-ranked opponent, of course you got to beat them. You got to beat them, and then obviously after the season they're gonna have to be on this rise for a trend. That's what it is. I think when we're talking about the resume is type of trends. I believe, in my opinion, the eye test is the best formula for it, just because, like, you can watch all these teams, and I understand there's a lot of people, especially on the ESPN broadcast, those analysts, and multiple out there who don't think Oregon, just because who they played and they had a close game against Texas Tech, is qualified for the college football playoff. And then Oregon, of course, they beat Utah, but now looking at how Utah's looked, did we just inflate Utah just because they beat USC? And now we know that USC is a 3-loss football team. So was that too much of inflation of a win? But I think when you look at Oregon, for example, and you're using the eye test, I think they can beat any team in the top four right now. Georgia, that's gonna be that'll be a close one. But I think outside of Georgia, they'll beat just about any team in the college football playoff. Now, who have they played anybody? Yeah, the only opponent that they played that's ranked really high thus far is Washington, but then they lost to Washington. And you also have to consider, if it wasn't for multiple fourth down failures, and especially that one on their second to last possession, they could have won that football game. Now we're talking about Oregon in a completely different level. With Washington, yeah, they're a really high and prolific offense, but defensively, they've been giving up a boatload of points. They haven't looked as stout. So on a neutral playing field, because it's a college football playoff, all these games are going to be neutral until we get into the 10-team playoff. Now it's the first round or a couple of rounds, I believe, is an away game, not a neutral site. I think, of course, let me know in the comments what you think. But I think eye test is what we have to use. And I'm on the different side with Oregon. I think Oregon, when you look at it eye test wise, they're the best team in college football. Their defense is playing really well. And their offense is on the same level as their defense. So they're playing this complementary football, taking care of opponents. They did play Washington. They did lose that game. But they also have to understand that they control their own destiny. You're going to have the Pac-12 championship. Win that game, you're most likely in. So I wanted to talk about a little bit about Michigan. There's tons of reports that are coming out. Obviously, we know their cheating scandal. Just about everyone in the country's kind of heard about it, known about it, heard a little bit of the details about it. We don't know if it's going to be the NCAA, which I don't think the NCAA really does anything. And if we were to leave it up to the NCAA, they would take years upon years to really figure this thing out. It could be the Big Ten. And looking at this, Michigan, this is where it gets really tricky. Like, what type of punishment needs to be done for them? Because obviously, this is something serious when the FBI gets involved and you've been not only stealing signals, like if you were to steal signals on a broadcast, that's fine, but doing it and having someone go to opponents' games in the future, up to 30 games, video record, I mean, it's just plainly in the rules. You can't do that. And then Michigan is a team that has a good chance of being the Big Ten representative for the college football playoff, maybe making a national championship push. And let's say they win the Big Ten, they beat Ohio State, they make a national championship push. Maybe let's just say hypothetically, for it to be interesting, they win the college football playoff national championship. And then in February, the Big Ten or anyone who has any type of ruling in this decision for a punishment punishes them. Now you're national champion, but your Big Ten representative is now punishing you, and you're the national champ, and you won the Big Ten championship, but you also cheated your way to it. Are they going to do it this season? I don't know. There's reports out there that it's going to be Harbaugh. Harbaugh's going to be suspended, for 3 games. I mean, is that enough, or should there be fines? Should there be a bowl ban? That's where it gets really interesting. But then, now that they have their toughest test, we've seen how the committee has ranked them. They're still keeping them in that top 4 at the number 3 spot. But it'll be interesting for me from like a football standpoint and looking at it from a coach's type of way, how Michigan looks playing a equal opponent. And I'll get a little bit into this matchup about the details, keys for victory. For Penn State, last time that they played in big game environments, and I talk about this a lot, and I can't emphasize it enough with young rookie quarterbacks in college football, is that you look at how they played in their first big game environment, and then you look at their second one. In the first one for Drew Aller, it was an away game, a terrible football game he had, really was ineffective. Now against Michigan, especially at home, how is he going to look? What has he learned from that before? Because we saw with Jalen Milroe, for example, in his game against Texas, looked flat out terrible. A lot of people were writing him off. But then against LSU, looked really well, had 4 rushing touchdowns, really a dynamic quarterback. And he's looking like he's learned a lot from that first big game environment. Can the same be said for Drew Aller? Now, Penn State, the identity of this football team is we are a running football team. We're a team that uses Singleton. We use Katron Allen. We're going to run the football game, establish play action, but they also have to find a deep threat to stretch the defense. Keandre Lambert-Smith, maybe he's your deep threat. Caden Saunders, we know he's really fast. Who's going to be that deep threat for Penn State to really keep the defense honest, keep the defense on their heels? For Michigan, it's really tough because we don't know they really haven't played anybody, and we haven't seen them really with their backs against the wall this season. I think it's a mystery box for Michigan. I don't know how they're going to look. I'm just assuming based off how they've looked this year, and going to go with that they're going to come out running the football because we know that's their brand. They run the football. J.J. McCarthy has taken a next step up. Maybe they decide that they're going to lean more on J.J. McCarthy. If I were to give you a game prediction, I would say I'm just going to go with Michigan. I think it's a close game, maybe a single possession game, but a lot of pressure, in my opinion, has to be put on James Franklin. Like, you have Drew Aller. I know how he's looked. I know what the stats say. I know what the eye test says. but he's a really talented quarterback. You have to, being that this is a 5-star quarterback, really high-rated quarterback that's going to Penn State in your school now, you have to develop him, and he has to be ready for these types of moments. And this game, running the football, going to be the key factor here, just because both teams do it. We know that's their identity. They do it pretty well. And takeaways. Like, it sounds redundant, and it sounds, of course, obvious to say takeaways. But takeaways and field position. Those are going to be the main keys. If Penn State can bait J.J. McCarthy into a couple throws and obviously put some pressure on him. Now, J.J. is a veteran, so he's probably and most likely seen it all. But we've also seen sometimes in big games, especially like the Illinois game, really comes out flat sometimes. And that's especially if you can stop the run. Now, talking a little bit of basketball right now, especially with what's going on with the LA teams, starting off with the Los Angeles Lakers, I really thought that this was a team that won free agency. They signed a lot of their key guys, got a lot of nice free agent acquisitions, especially some wing depth and a little bit of size. And instead, I was thinking this is going to be a team that takes off from where they finished last year. Instead, it has been quite the opposite of that. This is a team struggles offensively, especially when LeBron James isn't on the court. Now, that's tough because last year, one of the bright spots for them was as soon as LeBron James goes to the bench, they were able to either decrease the deficit or take a small lead. Now that's necessarily not happening. And then, of course, what's going on with Anthony Davis. He's an elite center, obviously one of the best when he's healthy. Now, I'm not saying he is the best, but I think we do have to include him when he's healthy in that tier with the Jokic's of the world, the Giannis's, the Embiid's, in that area, because we've seen moments from Anthony Davis, but then again, those are just moments. So a lot of people are debating, is he the right second option for LeBron James? I think a lot of times in the media, we take it, not advantage, but we don't realize how gifted Anthony Davis is, or maybe sometimes Anthony Davis doesn't realize how gifted he truly is. Like when it's really up and down with Anthony Davis. When he's on, he's one of the best centers in the league. When he's off, a lot of people are questioning if he's a good second or first option. I still think he is the right option for this team. We've seen it. They've won a championship together with Anthony Davis and LeBron James, but it all is about that second unit. LeBron James has said that right now, offensively, they're like the Pittsburgh Steelers. Can't outgain anybody, can't outscore anyone. And yeah, I mean, that's true. I think the Lakers are a little bit better than the Steelers if we're talking offense, but no, I know. That's football, basketball, all jokes aside. But that was one of the best attributes about this team. When LeBron and AD were off the court, they were able to take it up a notch. Now, I don't know what's happened. Maybe it's just a new season. They're coming out a little bit sloppy. Maybe they did think we're just going to finish or start off how we finished last year, and that's all going to translate. Thing is, teams, now they've had a full off season. They understand your strengths, weaknesses, how they can attack you. They're watching a lot of that Nuggets film to see how they did in the Western Conference Finals. That's what's going on. And listen, aside from the Rockets game, they've had some close games. Close game against the Miami Heat. We know the Heat went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. Not too early to panic, but I think it is cautious. What type of moves do they make? I don't know. I thought before this season that this roster was really complete, that they were going to put it all together. Haven't so far. It's going to be an interesting trade deadline, no matter what, especially for all these teams. Also, speaking about the association, I just can't stress enough how much it is about. It's the Denver Nuggets, and then it's completely everybody else. Like, even with Jamal Murray out, Jokic is still doing his thing. He's unguardable. Jokic is unguardable. Has just about everything. I mean, the touch he has on a lot of his finishes. Like, it's really unusual and novel types of finishes and the footwork that he has in the post game. But he still somehow, some way finds it to be able to put just enough touch, get it into the hoop, and then that touch translates to his passing and his overall court vision. Like, I think right now, if Jokic was in the NFL and some teams asked him, wanted him to audition to be quarterback, I think there's about 15, maybe 17 teams in the league that would say, yeah, we'll take Jokic as our quarterback. That's just how much touch he has on his passing, his IQ. Denver Nuggets team, I mean, it's them and everybody else. Like, they have, being a defending champ, you're always going to have that target on your back. This team has not only had, of course, they won the championship, but then they've taken it up a notch. They've taken it up a level. Now, with Jamal Murray being out for some time, that's obviously going to hurt. But like I said, I really just cannot stress enough. It's the Denver Nuggets, everybody else. And then now talking to the Eastern Conference, Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers are right now playing some phenomenal basketball. They traded away James Harden. A lot of people were like, well, why would you trade away James Harden? Well, what they were able to get, and I can't, like I mentioned before, I might sound redundant when I talk about the Philadelphia 76ers, but with Nick Nurse as their head coach, you obviously know with his time in Toronto, they're going to have a good defense, a lot of 3-and-D wings, guys who can guard the three ball, role players, but then they just fulfill their role. And then with Joel Embiid, obviously he's the engine of that basketball team. He's the number one option. He's their MVP. With him and Tyrese Maxey complement each other really well. Maxey's playing efficient basketball. I believe in the first 7 games, they were the first duo since Curry and Durant in the 17-18 season to the first 7 games to average 25, 5, and 5. That's pretty astounding. And you see it can work with that group. So you take Tyrese Maxey having that James Harden role, but being just a bit more efficient and fitting together with that team nicely. Embiid is the engine of the team. Everyone else, with Nurse, we know his defense, how his teams are going to perform. The role players are going to take their level up a notch and do what they need to help this team win. I know we talk about the Boston Celtics, then we talk a little bit about the Milwaukee Bucks, and it feels like with the 76ers, they've been that team that's like, oh yeah, we got to pay attention for, but then they really never do a whole lot, or they don't fulfill their goals. I think this is the year for the Philadelphia 76ers more than any year it's ever been so far in their previous process. Now with the LA Clippers, James Harden in his press conference said he's something along the lines of he is the system. If this was back when James Harden was in Houston, we'd have no problems with that. But the fact of the matter is, James Harden isn't what he was in Houston. The role for him, listen, this is a team that has Kawhi, PG. They don't need him to be the number one option or the guy that's going to have to go out there, get 25 or 30. That's not the role he's going to have to be asked to fulfill. He has to be that facilitator role like how he was early on when he was traded to the Nets. Maybe that's just not it for him, but I don't know if this is the right fit for the Clippers. Like, this move doesn't take him over the top, and I thought before they added James Harden, I really was questionable about this roster. But we'll see if PG, Kawhi can stay healthy. With Ty Lue, Russ is obviously going to have to fulfill his role. He's going to have to be that defensive anchor, bring a lot of energy to the team. It'll be interesting, but I have my doubts about the LA Clippers. Now, a little summary report with the Golden State Warriors. I mean, they've had a nice start to their season so far. Chris Paul has limited the turnovers from this team, something they really struggled with last year. 9 turnovers would be their first half, or sometimes even their quarter. Limiting their turnovers. Steph Curry, I mean, year 15, still doing what he does, playing really great basketball. They didn't have Gary Payton or Draymond Green, who was a really huge defensive pieces for that team. Still were able to keep it close with the Denver Nuggets. Obviously, lost that game. Golden State Warriors aren't a team, especially with championship aspirations, that's going to be looking to moral victories. But you really felt good about it. The only concern I have with this basketball team is who's that second option? Like the Golden State Warriors brand of basketball, which is a lot of movement, lots of screens, and just absolutely being a head and shoulders above everyone else at the three ball, is really cute, and it's really cool until they realize that Klay Thompson just isn't the same player as he was. Now, obviously, yes, he's dealt with some injuries, so we can't be too harsh on him. But is Andrew Wiggins going to be more consistent? Who is that second option? What is the type of offensive firepower? CP3's shot, his jumper three ball really isn't getting going down. Their only option sometimes, it feels like, is to give Steph Curry the ball and let him do his magic. Now that's nice, but for 82 games in a season, plus of course championship aspirations, especially in the playoffs, they're really going to have to find someone else to be that second option to step up or be more consistent. So a lot of hype has been made, and I'm talking about the NFL here, on Commanders starting quarterback Sam Howell. He's in his second year. Eric Bieniemy, we all know what he did with Patrick Mahomes and calling plays over there in Kansas City. He's now the offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders. The Sam Howell experience, to sum it up, is like a roller coaster. It really is. Tons of ups, tons of downs, really greats, some really, really not so greats. And you see that, like we'll see that with the Eagles game. Then he has these moments where he's throwing multiple interceptions, making reads that you say, what are you exactly looking at? I think for someone who's going to be up and down, now maybe this changes next year, and it'll be really interesting to see how the Commanders construct this roster, knowing that they're in a hard spot cap-wise for money terms, and then they don't have Chase Young, Montez Sweat on their roster anymore. So are they going to build that for more offensive line protection for Sam Howell? We know they have the weapons. Jahan Dotson, really great receiver, young one that they drafted out of Penn State. Terry McLaurin, we all know he's an elite wide receiver. Doesn't get a whole lot of production sometimes, but that's because the quarterback over there in Washington has really been up and down. I think as of right now, if you're saying he is a franchise guy, I mean, I'd be hesitant at that. So as of right now, the definitive answer is no. Just because if you're going to have someone be your franchise, they can't be up and down. If you're going to give them any type of guaranteed money or confidence, not necessarily, I think confidence is a bad word, but to hand them over the keys to the franchise, they've really got to be more consistent. They can't be up and down. Is there a lot of potential there? Yes, obviously. He's got the footwork. Maybe he can fix a couple of things, step up in the pocket more. I've seen that especially. He doesn't really step up in the pocket when it's a rusher's coming right at him. Now, of course, that's easy for someone like me or the general audience to say, but that's also the requirement of a lot of quarterbacks, is to step up, take the hit, deliver in the pocket. So as of right now, for someone who's up and down and their experience has been a roller coaster, I'm not saying he's a franchise guy, but I like what he has to offer and his type of potential. So let me know in the comment section what you all think. And of course, but before you do that, go to the description of this video, follow me on social media, the links to my TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, Twitter account, all are going to be in there. Make sure you follow me, hit that like button, hit that bell to get all notifications. You don't want to miss any content I have coming up, especially in draft season. I'll be doing a lot of film reviews on elite prospects coming up. Don't want to miss any of that. And of course, like this video, subscribe. Thank you. It means a lot to me. Now, lastly, my last segment. Not going to have any game picks this week. Been having an abysmal performance in my game picks. So gonna delete that out of there. But also be talking about, is this quarterback a franchise guy? Or is this next team gonna roll with this quarterback? That is, talk about the Chicago Bears. They beat the Carolina Panthers last night, have a 41% chance of having the first overall pick in the upcoming draft. Of course, we all know Caleb Williams, labeled as a generational talent, drawing comparisons to Patrick Mahomes, a consensus first overall draft selection. Choosing Caleb Williams or Justin Fields, I'm obviously going to roll with Caleb Williams right here. Caleb Williams has gotten a lot of knocks on him for being that he doesn't really operate in structure. It's a lot of outside the pocket plays. So an offensive coordinator who's drawing something that's in structure just to have Caleb Williams go freestyle out there. Obviously, offensive coordinator, whoever draws up that game plan has been drawing up for weeks, staying up till midnight, sometimes 1, 2, 3 in the morning to drop the game plan, only to have Caleb Williams go out of structure. I mean, they're obviously going to be upset about that. But that shouldn't be too much of a knock on him. Like, we've seen how valuable, like with Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, how valuable it is to operate out of structure, outside the pocket, just freestyling out there. Obviously, would love to see him do more in structure, but another knock on him has been when he plays up against tough defenses in college, particularly Utah, Notre Dame. He really doesn't have well. Some of his worst performances are against really good defenses. I'll still take Caleb Williams, but I'll take so in the fact that I don't think or recommend that the Chicago Bears have Matt Eberflus as their head coach next year. If Matt Eberflus is the head coach next year and you draft Caleb Williams, I mean, you're trying to repeat something. I mean, you're doing the definition of insanity, thinking it's gonna work with this young, talented quarterback. I think if you're Chicago Bears, you have to have an offensive mind as your head coach for that team. Maybe that's the Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator. Maybe that is a San Francisco 49ers offensive coordinator, because we know just about every single one of those guys becomes a great head coach, great offensive mind. Maybe it's one of them, but it has to be an offensive mind guy to help Caleb Williams to really develop him. And then if you're lucky enough, as it currently stands, the Chicago Bears have the first and fifth overall draft selection. Maybe you go get Marvin Harrison Jr. or Brock Bowers. But I felt like no matter what Justin Fields was going to do, like, let's say he threw for anywhere from 3,500 to 4,000 passing yards, had a good season, a solid season, but the Chicago Bears, whether it was the Carolina Panthers or however they had the first overall draft selection, they were still going to take Caleb Williams or Drake May over. That's my thoughts. Of course, audience, let me know what you think in the comments section. Should the Chicago Bears draft Caleb Williams, or are you going to roll with Justin Fields, put a little bit more around him, maybe get some offensive linemen, although their offensive line has been performing pretty well so far, especially with Tyson Bagent at the quarterback. If you're the Chicago Bears, what are you doing? Who are you drafting? What moves are you making? Let me know in the comments section. I appreciate all of y'all, your participation. Every one of y'all, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart who follow me on social media. Again, the links will be in the description. Make sure you go check that out. Subscribe to my channel. Like my posts. Turn on post notifications. I appreciate it. Thank every one of y'all. Have a fantastic Friday. Stay safe out there. Have fun. God bless y'all. And until next time.